Welcome. The global battle for AI dominance isn't a single race, it's fracturing. In this analysis, we're going to use the latest Q3 2025 data to dissect the three-way geopolitical split and, more importantly, uncover the 6 unique high-stakes strategies of the tech titans leading the charge. So let's begin with the conclusion first. The world of artificial intelligence is splitting into 3 distinct geopolitical spheres: the US, China, and the European Union. But the real story, the one we're digging into today, is inside that dominant US bloc. The 6 companies at the very forefront are not in a single race. No, they're on 6 fundamentally different strategic paths. All right, let's dive in and dissect those 6 divergent strategies within the United States. First up, Microsoft. They are aggressively building what can only be called an enterprise AI factory. Their path to monetization is probably the clearest in the industry, right? You have Azure growth accelerating, driven by AI, and you have Copilot adoption surging. Plus, that new $250 billion OpenAI deal, well, that provides incredible visibility for future growth. The catch? Immense hardware execution risk. Reports suggest their next-gen proprietary chips are delayed, and they're carrying a staggering capital burden, annualized at over $140 billion, which is absolutely pressuring their short-term cash flow. Next, we have Google, the full-stack incumbent. They've really managed to shift their AI investments from being a cost center to a true profit engine. Google Cloud is the standout here. Its profit margin is expanding, and its contract backlog has ballooned to $155 billion. The primary challenge for Google, though, it's structural. It's the rise of so-called zero-click searches. That's where AI gives you the answer directly, so you never have to click on an ad-supported link. And that poses a fundamental threat to their legacy advertising business. Then there's Amazon. AWS continues to be the foundational layer of this entire AI economy. We've seen its year-over-year growth re-accelerate to 20%, which confirms this AI demand wave is very real. Their partnership with Anthropic was a strategic masterstroke, and their own Trainium chip business is now a multi-billion-dollar success. The challenge? Well, it's what you could call a colossal cash flow chasm. Capital expenditure is nearly $116 billion. That has caused their free cash flow to plummet, creating some very real short-term financial pressure. Meta is making a very high-stakes, high-risk pivot towards what you might call consumer superintelligence. Now, what's often missed is that their past AI investments, things like the Advantage Plus ad suite and the Reels recommendation engine, are already multi-billion-dollar revenue streams. The real challenge here is one of narrative. When management guided for a new, open-ended capital spending cycle, it completely shattered their year of efficiency story, and that injected a huge amount of uncertainty right back into their financial model. Apple, on the other hand, is playing an entirely different game. They have masterfully repositioned AI around privacy and on-device processing. They've turned a potential weakness into a unique strength. You could argue their economic model is structurally superior because they offload the immense costs of AI inference onto you, the consumer, through hardware purchases, and that in turn is designed to drive a new hardware upgrade supercycle. The primary risks for Apple are mostly external. Yes, lagging on features could be an issue, but the truly severe long-term threats are the regulatory ones aimed at its integrated ecosystem in both the EU and the US. And finally, Tesla. Look, its value proposition is not about cars anymore. It's a venture-style bet on physical world AI, robotics, and autonomy. The vision is singular and vertically integrated. But the financial health of its core auto business, which is the cash engine for these huge ambitions, is deteriorating. And maybe more critically, there's a strategic fork risk, where the foundational AI development could end up benefiting the CEO's private company, xAI, which creates a direct conflict for talent, for capital, and for strategic direction. So here's the crucial takeaway. When you map all these companies out, it becomes crystal clear we are not witnessing one race, but 6 very different ones. Each is defined by a unique combination of core strategy, monetization, hardware dependency, and that results in vastly different levels of capital intensity and, of course, different risk profiles. Of course, these corporate battles don't happen in a vacuum. So let's zoom out to the geopolitical stage and actually quantify the strategic gaps that are now opening up between the world's major economic blocs. In the race to develop foundational intelligence, the data from 2024 paints a very clear picture. The United States maintains a commanding lead in the sheer output of notable AI models. This really reflects its deep concentration of top-tier research labs and an unparalleled venture capital ecosystem. This entire competition, however, is fundamentally constrained by one thing: hardware.
US-designed chips, like NVIDIA's, built on TSMC's cutting-edge process nodes, they remain the undisputed performance benchmark. Now, in response to export controls, China is pursuing a self-sufficiency path with some impressive alternatives, like Huawei's Ascend series. But while their performance is notable, they do still lag on key metrics and they face significant manufacturing constraints.
And this slide illustrates a really critical nuance. The so-called AI gap is not a single static number. It's a dynamic, multi-layered system. You see, at the absolute cutting edge, the hardware gap is actually widening because of export controls. At the same time, the software and model gap is rapidly compressing. And perhaps most importantly, the gap in private capital being deployed is widening at an accelerating rate.
So this complex global competition really rests on three foundational pillars: hardware, talent, and capital. Let's break down each one.
Okay, looking at the global talent map, the United States is still the primary destination. About half of all top AI researchers work there. But the cultivation of talent is shifting dramatically. China now cultivates the largest share of top researchers, at 47%. This signals a really important long-term structural shift away from a simple brain drain model to one of brain retention and circulation.
Now, this slide is where the sheer scale of the capital disparity really hits you. In 2025, just 4 U.S. tech companies are projected to spend over $300 billion on capital expenditures. To put that in perspective, China's entire latest national semiconductor fund is capitalized at roughly $47.5 billion. The annual investment of just a handful of U.S. companies completely dwarfs the national-level funds of its primary competitor.
So how do you navigate this trifurcated, multi-layered competition? What's the right framework for analysis?
While this three-speed world demands three distinct analytical frameworks, for the U.S. market, you need a nuanced barbell approach, distinguishing between the validated lower-risk growth paths and the high-beta platform bets. For the China market, the analysis has to be viewed primarily through a geopolitical lens, focusing on beneficiaries of the state's push for self-sufficiency. And for the EU, a venture capital-style approach is probably most appropriate, hunting for niche champions in regulated industries or in that emerging sovereign AI space.
All of this analysis leaves us with one final critical question for the years ahead. As these massive investment cycles mature and technology turns, which of these three foundational pillars, the absolute cutting edge of hardware, the rapidly diffusing intelligence of software, or the sheer overwhelming scale of capital, which one will ultimately prove to be the most decisive in determining leadership in the AI era?